thing is Santa. But as for me and Grandpa, we believe.
It is December 24th, 2021. Welcome to the Daily Rob. It is Christmas Eve, but you can always find us on YouTube, Facebook, BitChute, Rumble, Odyssey, and across all major podcast platforms. Now, without further ado, the one, the only, the legendary Rob Smith.
That would be me, Stu. I am in Atlanta, Georgia today, Stu. I'm here at the historic Swan House. You know what I'm doing down here, Stu? I'm following the truth is what I'm doing, Stu. It's my middle name, Robert Truth Smith. Stu, we break stories all the time, and then 2-3 days later, the rest of the media picks up on it. And there's a lawsuit filed in Fulton County, and it's about election fraud. And the lawsuit says what happened is a statistical improbability. And one of the elements of the lawsuit, Stu, is they put these ballots through the scanner, and then they have like this matrix list that records everything that happened. And it records these ballots going through the scanner at speeds that could not happen, that are physically impossible. The ballots generally, they have to be adjudicated, and when they can't read things, and some of these didn't go through the scanner until like 8 days after the election. The adjudication happens immediately when they can't read it. And there are a lot of other problems, but I'm here talking to poll officials, talking to citizens, too. I'm getting to the bottom of things. America has me to thank for honest elections. Stu, another kind of totalitarian dictate is the city of New York. New York. They are saying they just passed, well, actually, it's the state of New York. The governor signed legislation that if you provide a false vax card, you can go to jail for a year, Stu. You can knife somebody in the subway and you you might get a week in jail. Big news today, Stu, about the officer Potter, Kim Potter. She was convicted of first-degree manslaughter in the death of Daunte Wright. And Stu, I think it's a shame. There's no contributory negligence on what Daunte Wright did, in that he's a thug, he's a punk. They thought he was about to pull a gun. He's a career criminal. And can you imagine what it's like to be a cop, to have to put up with that day in and day out? You make one mistake and you go to jail for maybe 14 years. What happened to this gal is she thought he was about to pull a gun, and she thought she was pulling her taser, and it was her real gun, and she shot him. So, Stu, these cases are so politically charged. I don't think these people get a fair trial. What would be reasonable is a second-degree manslaughter, which is a negligence methodology to that. First degree is that you do something with such wanton indifference and passion, and you kill somebody. Even you don't intend to kill them, but you do it with such wanton disregard of what might happen, and passion is first degree. But I don't think you can be convicted of passion when you think you're about to get shot. Anyway, it's I feel sorry for these people, in that they do one thing wrong, but they're faced with folks who do things wrong, deadly things every day. Harris County Public Health today said, when asked about if this guy really did die of the Omicron, and Martha Marquez, by the way, Stu, you know what the original name of Atlanta was? This is for 50 points, Stu.
The original name of Atlanta?
Original name of Atlanta. It changed its name to Atlanta, had another name. It was at the end of a railroad line originally.
I have no clue.
Marthasville.
Okay.
See, here, Stu, you get substantive news and useless trivia in the same podcast. How many people could say that? Well, this gal, Martha, we can't confirm that the person died from COVID, but we can say that he was Omicron positive at the time of his death. He was asked. So he died with COVID, but you can't say he died from COVID. Correct.
We cannot confirm that the patient died from COVID, but we can say that he was Omicron positive at the time of his death.
So he died with COVID, but you can't say that he died from COVID.
Correct. This information comes from our epidemiologists, who are the ones who get the reports. They have to do a very meticulous investigation because, they do take this very much at heart. They're telling me that they cannot say that that COVID was the absolute cause of death.
There you go, Stu. They're a lying bunch of sons of the bitches. Now, Stu, you got this guy, James Clyburn, who's probably the reason that Joe Biden is president, if you remember. He's from South Carolina. And I wanted to just kind of have everybody get in the mind of these idiots, these ideological idiots. Guess what? He's double vaxxed and he's gotten his booster and he's gotten COVID, okay? So this is what he said in his announcement. Today, I received a positive COVID-19 diagnosis. This is a breakthrough case. What the hell does breakthrough case even mean anymore, Stu? And I am asymptomatic. America is in a new phase of this pandemic. No one is immune. I urge anyone who has not done so to protect themselves by getting vaccinated and boosted. Well, aren't you vaccinated and boosted and you still get the goddamn thing? But you're going to go tell the world to do exactly what you did that didn't work? This is like a Washington mindset. Let's do over and over what doesn't work. And Stu, if they had any sympathy for the public at all, they would say, you know what? You might try some of these prophylactics out there. They've worked all over the world. Anyway, Stu, I'm right again about that. Stu, we had somebody stand up to Gavin Good-Hair Newsom, the tyrant governor of California. The Oakdale School District said to Gavin, did you see that, Stu? I know we're on podcast. I shouldn't do the visual. Basically holding my middle finger up for all those in podcast land. Okay, yeah. I'm sorry.
We actually have some Australian listeners now.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I was happy to see that.
Hey, mates.
Good day.
Good day. By the way, I think Crocodile Dundee is a great guy. You remember when he pulled out the knife? He goes, "That's not a knife." And he pulls out, "This is a knife."
You mean one of these?
There you go, Stu. I knew you had one. Don't mess with Stu, folks. He'll cut your heart out and then he'll eat it. I've seen him do that 3 times. Well, this Oakdale, I had to look it up, Stu. It's something I didn't know off the top of my head, but guess what? They're not on the coast. They're in the San Joaquin Valley, which is a much more conservative part of Commie, California. And they said, we're not taking your mandate, shove it up your beep. So good on them. And of course, what does the health bureaucracy in California do, Stu? They immediately suggest they're going to punish them by cutting off their money. And another COVID story, Stu, there's a Royal Caribbean cruise ship. I think it had 7,000 people on it. All of them are vaccinated, Stu. And it had to turn around. It was going to St. Martin's. It left Miami, was going to St. Martin's or someplace. and it had to pull a Yui and come back to Miami because of a COVID breakout. Now, Stu, this is what they don't, this is emblematic of what they don't want, in that they don't want another sample class. They want to blame the unvaccinated for the mistakes they've made by hitching their wagon to big pharma. And here is another example. There's no other way to get this thing. And a bunch of them have it. Meaning, what they promote and proselytize doesn't work. And one day somebody's going to write a book, Stu, it might be you or me, and we're going to expose all this and show that this could be the biggest crime of a public policy ever in the United States. Another COVID story, Stu, is there's a city in China named Xi'an, or Xi'an. How would you say it, Stu? You know Mandarin. Xi apostrophe an. Xi'an or Xi'an?
It would be closer to Xi'an.
Xi'an. Okay. Well, it's a city of 13 million people, and they've locked it down. It's over in the western portion of the state, and it was the end of the Silk Road, interesting enough. And I did not know this, but they had a large number of Christians there in the 600s. But anyway, they've only had 143 hospitalizations, I think. Yeah, only 143 have tested. Out of 13 million, only 143 have tested for COVID over 2 weeks. So what do you think's going on there, Stu? Is it a new strain, or is it a totalitarian lockdown for some other reason, using COVID as a subterfuge? And as we've learned in the United States, COVID is a great subterfuge for election fraud, taking your liberties away. I suspect it has something to do with taking advantage of the situation instead of a real health crisis. And finally, Stu, there are a bunch of staffers who work at the White House. And apparently there's talk of a mass exodus. And nobody really knows why. The reports say, oh, it's probably this or it's probably that. They don't get to go to holiday parties, the pandemic. One of the assertions is that the Biden team is really mean to them and looks down upon them. But my antennae tell me, and of course, Stu, what? Did you just say I'm always right? Oh, okay. It has more to do with they being on a sinking ship and they want to get off of it. That would be the logical, deductive reasoning of a great mind, Stu. That's what I got, Stu.
Well, I will build on exactly what you just said. So the New York Times just interviewed VP Harris, and I think it's just one of these puff pieces that they're doing right now to try to help that administration out. And Meghan McCain was really disgusted by that whole interview. And she said this specifically about staffers. So this is Meghan McCain, the daughter of John McCain. Many staffers who worked in my dad's office worked there for decades. Many of them married fellow staffers. Many of them are considered family by my family, and we still maintain close relationships. It is not a foregone conclusion that staffers rotate in and out of the offices of politicians like a turnstile in a subway station. In fact, most of the greats, including President Joe Biden, have long-time and loyal staff who stay because they are inspired by principle and can't imagine working anywhere else. My sister-in-law is an advisor to Congressman Kevin McCarthy, and many times we have had a conversation about different politicians on Capitol Hill with a loyal staff or a huge turnover rate. Most of the huge turnover rate people are known to have bad reputations and be lame duck politicians. And so it seems like this administration or specific people in the administration, whether it's VP Harris and now people on Biden's team are considering it to be a lame duck presidency, they're getting out of there. So I think what you really have is with Harris, you have a lot of ego and there's a bad reputation in that office. And now with Joe Biden, I think they're seeing it's written on the wall that the media isn't going to bat for this guy all the time. And it's now becoming a lame duck presidency.
Interesting, Stu. Let me ask you one very substantive question.
What's up?
If you were on a desert island with Meghan McCain, no one else was there.
Okay.
Would she A, become your concubine and you'd have 11 children? B, would you totally avoid her? Or C, would you tie her to a tree and have her eaten alive by fire ants? Propose a D if you would like.
I would say D. I would get an idea of who she actually is away from the cameras.
Oh, you would get to know her.
Yeah, why not? I mean,
really getting to know a woman instead of having superficial thoughts about her. You think that's the way to go in a relationship?
If I'm
to treat them like a human being?
If I'm on an island, I'm trying to survive. So
okay. All right. You might need her to survive. You might need her to go spear some fish or something.
Well, who knows?
Yeah.
But,
okay.
But
you're keeping your options open.
Okay. But
all right. Smart man.
In the New York Times article, one of the things that came up was how Kamala felt that she would not be getting any blame if she were a white man.
Oh,
so
God.
That came up again. Ms. Harris has privately told her allies that the news coverage of her would be different if she were any of her 48 predecessors, all of whom were white and male, according to the account.
And the truth is, she's been treated with kid gloves merely because she's a black female.
She has also confided in them about the difficulty she is facing with the intractable issues in her portfolio, such as voting rights and the root cause of migration.
Well,
and then it says Harris is the first black woman to ever fill the vice presidential role, which has long been derided as a difficult job, although in recent years, vice presidents have become key advisors and powers in their own right. So do you want to know who she reached out to for advice?
Hillary?
Yes. Hillary made the list. Madeleine Albright made the list.
Oh, God.
Condoleezza Rice.
You know.
And then my favorite is this next one, Angela Merkel.
God.
Yeah.
You know, Stu, they talk about her portfolio of positions. The real reason that she's in trouble is because she's so obvious a lightweight. Just listen to her in any conversation. She has no business running a candy stand. She's a complete vacuous idiot with no real world experience. Her entire political career, she's been promoted just because of her black womanhood. And she's never had to do anything but recite certain platitudes.
And the article by Meghan kind of discussed that, how it went against her view of feminism. She sees herself as a second wave feminist, and that this third wave of feminism, it is so about the identity aspects that's what. So Biden comes out, he says he wants a woman, and the Democratic Party says they want it to be a woman of color. And so then it's a foregone conclusion that she's at the top of that candidate pool as a result, despite not being qualified, despite getting annihilated in the debates by Tulsi and, not polling well, and how it really is just, well, essentially, and then, and Meghan, really put it well at the end of the article when she says, we can have conversations about double, even triple standards as women, but Vice President Harris is the second most powerful person on the planet. It might be productive for her to start leading from a place of power and strength instead of victimizing herself.
I couldn't agree more with that. But here's the contrast. Condoleezza Rice was Secretary of State.
Mm-hmm.
Was she Secretary of State or National Security Advisor?
I believe she was Secretary of State.
Yeah, okay. Well, I never ever thought of her as a Black woman. I didn't think of her in those terms. I knew that how she grew up in Alabama, but I respected her because of who she was, her character, and her positions. Kamala has no character, and she doesn't really have any convictions of any sort. So I get so tired of that's the only tool in the arsenal is just to cry, racism, misogynism, this ism, that ism. Why don't you get off your ass and show that you're smart, you've got good policies, and be able to articulate them.
And people can say what they want about Trump, that he was a buffoon, but he was intelligent enough to find issues and make them rallying calls that got him support. So even though she has a shit basket with migration, and honestly, I don't see how voting rights is a tough issue, but she could find something else that she could champion, get support on, and be perceived as a leader, even if it was an uphill battle with that issue.
Well, she could. It's
Will she?
theoretically possible. But when you're 50 years old or 55 or however old she is, and you've never done anything of substance in the real world, and your whole life has been based on cackling, she will never be able to leave because she doesn't have the DNA to do so.
Yeah, and if you just want to just make snap judgments off kind of just video, she seemed unwell and a little bit unstable when she was being interviewed by Charlemagne the God. And Charlemagne kind of made the joke of, well, it looks like Joe Manchin's the real president. He's the one who puts a stop to everything. And then she's just like, well, let me be clear that I'm the vice president and Joe Biden is the real president. I mean,
I want to know who's the real president of this country. Is it Joe Biden or Joe Manchin?
I'm sorry, I interrupted. I don't think the vice president can hear you. It's Simone. I'm so sorry, Charlemagne. We have to wrap.
She can hear me.
You can hear me? Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me, Madam Vice President?
So I'm sorry, we got to wrap.
Oh.
So I'm sorry to interrupt.
They're acting like they can't hear me. Y'all see that?
I can hear you.
Oh, so who's
can hear you.
the real president of this country? Is it Joe Manchin or Joe Biden, Madam Vice President?
Come on, Charlemagne. It's Joe Biden.
I can't tell sometimes.
No. It's Joe Biden, and don't start talking like a Republican about asking whether or not he's president.
Do you think Joe Manchin is a problem?
It's Joe Biden, and I'm vice president, and my name is Kamala Harris.
Freaked out on him. And it was clearly a joke. And this is someone who she's been on his show multiple times. So they have a rapport.
The mere fact that she was on his show, I think, is illustrative of the fact that she is an empty suit. Why do you go on a show?
That's the same. It's not the exact same. It's the same host, but a different program. But that's the same guy that Joe Biden said, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black.
You ain't black, yeah.
Listen, you got to come see us when you come to New York, VP Biden.
I will.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
Yeah.
So they have their consummate ally interviewing her.
Right, and she still loses it.
I know. I mean, what the fuck?
But instead of going on these shows, how about doing what a lot of Americans do, like you and I do, work 14 hours a day, getting something constructive done. instead of cackling and spewing a bunch of nonsensical platitudinal verbiage.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that she could do as a whole that
Like go down to the border with a machine gun and stand there and say, "Don't cross the Rio Grande." Anything, you know.
Well, I mean, she could call Amazon up and say, "How do you all do so well with your supply chain issues that you guys are hiring out private boats and are going to different ports? You know, what would your advice be to get this crack-a-lacking again, and then take the steam away from someone like Buttigieg? You know, do his job better than he does, and then you get rid of an enemy in the same capacity." You know, she's the vice president.
You are so Machiavellian.
She's a Machiavellian person. You would imagine that would be the strategy she would use.
You would think, but she's not smart enough to.
Yeah, I mean, it's very. She is. The more she's in the spotlight, the more I'm just very intrigued by her as a person. Where I think she really thought she was going to be president because Joe Biden was going to be dead. So all she had to do was just make this deal with the devil and then write it out. And she still might be.
Very well be.
So, but there was an article out about her recently saying that she might be the next Spiro Agnew. So we'll see. Something else that I'm keeping an eye on is concerning China. This really actually caught me off guard. You know, we had reported on it a few weeks ago. Rubio making this notion of slave labor his kind of big issue that he was going to work on. And so Biden signs law banning goods made in China's Xinjiang province. And so new rules imposed by Congress will require exporters to U.S. to prove products were not made with forced labor. And so
how can you prove that, Stu?
I don't think you really can.
I think this whole law is just a feel-good paper tiger. How in the hell are they ever going to prove what goods come from where?
Well, China denies it even happens in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, it's what Congress does all the time. They pass these laws that are for show only, and often they do more harm than good. In other words, they might make other products from China cost more, just trying to enforce the law, you know.
Interesting. Okay. And so Representatives James McGovern and Chris Smith did this in the House. They got this through. And then in the Senate, it was Jeff Merkley and Mark Rubio. So just giving them a shout out.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our
constituents and say, we stopped slave labor in China. You ask me, Stu, all 1.3 billion people in China are slaves. Well, now, being a little facetious, but all 20 million in North Korea are slaves. They're slaves to the state.
Yeah.
And a lot of people in China are slaves to the state. You work for the state. They tell you how many children you can have. It's no different than American slavery. In fact, it's worse in a lot of places.
And so my last story for the day, Julian Assange's lawyers start process for Supreme Court appeal to stop WikiLeaks founder being extradited to the US. And so this is in the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. And so Assange's lawyers filed this and they said, we believe serious and important issues of law of wider public importance are being raised in this application. They arise from the court's judgment and its receipt and reliance on US assurances regarding the prison regimes and treatment Mr. Assange is likely to face if extradited. Because this application is now the subject of judicial consideration, his lawyers do not propose to comment further at the moment. We hope and trust the High Court will grant a certificate on the questions raised, as well as giving permission to appeal in order that they can thereafter be fully argued before the Supreme Court. So trying to keep him from being sent to the United States, which will most likely be.
I have a jaundiced view of the Department of Justice. You remember how Epstein died in prison?
Yeah.
Remember all the circumstances?
Yeah, I mean,
what do you think is going to happen to Assange going to a correctional facility like the one in New York?
I mean, Hillary Clinton openly said that, why can't we just drone strike him? So what am I supposed to expect will happen?
No rule of law, no due process. Let's just kill our enemies.
Yeah.
You know, Stu, I'm a big believer in due process and the rule of law. People have to have trials. They have to be fair. Even people I don't like, Stu, even for heinous crimes. I'd rather see a person get off for murder than to have the state rig the system.
Yeah, most definitely. So that's all I got for you today.
All right, Stu. I'm gonna walk on over to Buckhead, check things out. They don't have the limelight there anymore, so I'll probably just, have a milkshake or something at the Varsity.
Well, enjoy.
All right, Stu, go get them.
Later.
I'm walking back to Georgia, and I hope she will take me back. Nothing in my pockets, and all I own is upon my back.